Hello, online buddies. Welcome back to the channel. Today's episode is a twist from the usual, as it's nice to change things up to keep it interesting. But it's about the Russell Brand case. The headlines have been wild, but they have been for some time now. But what I want us to do is to peel back the layers and look at what this says about leadership, power, HR accountability, and how culture gets shaped for better or worse. So I'll be reading from an excellent article by Hina Belitz, published by the People Management on April 16th, 2025. And I'll be giving my professional take with commentary and some constructive criticism. Because while this is a celebrity case, it's also a workplace story and one we all need to pay attention to, especially if you're a manager in HR or just someone who cares about people and workplace culture. So let's get into it. So who is Russell Brand? You can find information in the public domain, and ChatGPT was able to summarize this for me. And so I'll just be reading that out. Russell Brand started in stand-up comedy before rising to fame through shows like Big Brother's Big Mouth. And he was known for his provocative humor, flamboyant style, and he became a media fixture. There were a few earlier controversies, and there was a BBC scandal, prank scandal called the Sashgate scandal. I cannot remember the details of this, but that didn't even slow him down. He transitioned into film and he starred in hits like Forgetting Sarah Marshall in America, before rebranding as a political and spiritual commentator on platforms like YouTube, here on YouTube. I do remember that he was married to Katy Perry for a short bit, but it just goes to show his level of fame had gone beyond the UK and spread to America and beyond. So this is a very interesting career journey, but that was because he also had such charisma. But this charisma made Russell Brand move from that initial shock jock and on Big Brother's Big Mouth to become a spiritual sage. And he built influence by being unpredictable, which made him hard to challenge. And that's lesson for number one, because remember, we're trying to use this story to see what we can do to make improvements in the world of people management for HR and business leaders. And one of the first things that I would touch on is the importance of identifying your key stakeholders. Look at your key stakeholders and those who have great influence in your organization and start to see the value that they bring. But also use that point to understand at which point someone bringing in value can shift the scale from them being a risk to the organization, because you start to see all the value that they bring without looking at any other influence or negative influences that they may have on the organization. But let me continue with the background story. As Brand evolved, his platform expanded from comedy stages to podcasts and YouTube videos critiquing the establishment, the government, lots of conspiracy theories. I was actually an avid follower of him at some point. Already he had an existing fan base, but that just amplified his fan base and also created an increase in influence across multiple industries. But in 2023, following an investigation by the Channel 4's dispatches and the Sunday Times, allegations of serious sexual misconduct against Brand were made public. And the reports triggered a police investigation and eventually formal charges. As of April 2025, Russell Brand has been charged with 5 offenses. This was between the periods of 1999 to 2005. The charges involve 4 different women and span a 6-year period. Brand, however, denies all accusations, and he stated in a public video that what I never was a rapist. I've never engaged in non-consensual activity. So those are his words. He has been asked to appear at Westminster Magistrates Court on the 2nd of May 2025, although he is currently believed to be in the United States. So, okay, just to be clear, these are serious allegations, but he is presumed innocent, as with the case of justice. But from an HR angle, the concern isn't about what is proven, it's also about the environments where these behaviors are enabled or ignored. If multiple people had concerns for years and no one felt able to speak up, that's a systems failure, full stop. Let's get to the article. So, as a reminder, this is the article by Belitz from the People Management newsletter, and I'll be sharing my thoughts and commenting as we go along. It starts off by saying that we see all too often the power that one big player can have in an organization or business and the destructive influence they can exert. Although the government and employers alike are keen to prevent the ramifications of such power imbalances, recent media attention towards individuals such as Russell Brand have shown that this is no easy task when employees feel disempowered from taking action or even reporting such individuals. In Brand's case, he worked as a presenter for several of BBC's radio programs, during which staff witnessed his alleged inappropriate behavior, such as peeing into a cup during a show. However, BBC staff felt that they could not raise their discomfort with the employer because they believed that Brand was too influential for concerns to be taken seriously. This is completely aligned to the way employees with sexual harassment concerns feel when considering powerful bosses in a company. The result is that such behavior never gets reported or investigated. I'll pause here and I'll share that so many people have lived this in silence. When someone's status outweighs process, it creates fear and apathy. And the worst part, it tells everyone that speaking up isn't worth the cost. Russell Brand became a brand. And with that came the dangerous cocktail of charisma, controversy, and where we are all confused by what's true. And this emphasizes the point I made earlier about unchecked power, because unchecked power can happen in any institution. And this is why we need checks and balances, no matter the role or position. And I must say, for even those who do speak up, on occasions, the grievance or the whistleblowing process can be made complicated and less transparent, that it either results in the victim or observer giving up or leaving the organization or being paid to go away. And no matter how we try to cover things up, it sends a signal to colleagues about the organization's priorities and how they can turn a blind eye to bad behavior. I have experienced leaders in the C-suite actually being the one who having the most fear and not being able to speak up as they see the scapegoat and feel like they have a lot more to lose, whether it's their pay or position, etc. So in a sense, leaders need to understand that if they do not create that right environment for openness, transparency, and accountability, it actually affects they themselves. But anyway, I digress. Let's get back. The article continues sharing that the BBC introduced updated anti-harassment policies, case management for serious complaints, and editorial oversight. That's great, but this is the BBC. It's a reputable company with greater resources, even more than the smaller charities. And so we expect this from them as a standard. And they should have done this years ago. As I said, small charities are already doing this. So why did it take media exposure to act? Or are they now actually applying the policies and adhering to it as there's greater scrutiny? It made me think, how are the HR teams managing this? Of course, HR could have done all the work and made all the noise for the right things to be done, but the final decision is on leadership. As a HR professional myself, I do understand the nuance of being able to address things diplomatically, still being able to do your job, whilst also if you're working in such a toxic place, you're also thinking about keeping your job. It makes it really difficult to shout louder when you know that you will get the first shot. Do you see what I mean? And that's how HR can be both an angel and an enabler. It's about what we allow and what we look away from. And it is really difficult being a HR professional myself. And hear me when I tell you that it's a very difficult position to be. when there's a lot at stake. Let's get back to the article. One area conspicuously absent from this is detailed and comprehensive training for all employees on how to recognize, address, and manage incidents of bullying, harassment, etc. Policies may be in place, but if employees are not trained on those policies and do not know how to employ them in their workplaces or work days, then policies themselves will have very limited effect in reality. Preach, as this is exactly my point. The policies will gather dust if not followed through. Training is where culture is modeled, embedded, and awareness is maintained. Otherwise, your policies are just wallpaper. And then the article states that the courts are recognizing that it is no longer enough to pay lip service with the introduction of policies, and one must also ensure that they are used and understood. Recent case law, such as UK Limited versus Gelan, has affirmed that training provided to employees to make them aware of the law on harassment must be regularly updated and must meet a certain degree of quality. So, one clear action here is to have a policy and then provide training. The other actions are to regularly review them, and I will add that policy should have evidence of compliance to set out how that policy is being upheld or adhered to. This does not necessarily mean that it should feature in the policies themselves, but HR needs to have an audit check on how the policy is working as it's supposed to. The article adds that this raises the question of how employees should respond to these problematic yet highly influential individuals and how to ensure employees are confident that their well-being at work will be taken seriously. So my addition to this is the policies need to have that clear process on how that would be applied, which I've just talked about. It needs a clear statement stating that it applies to all employees, regardless of position, and it needs to be emphasized and communicated to all the different levels of staff, with even the founders, trustees, and other board members, and they need to co-sign it with their full support. And so how does that look like? So for example, in training, the CEOs should publicly state that the policies apply to them. It's important that they actually acknowledge that this is an existing policy and it applies to them, and that no one is exempt. It should also be part of the induction process, whether as a recording or a bold statement in the performance management system. So what I am trying to say is that for a policy, once that a policy is published and training is provided, it should still be relived in all the other HR activities that take place in the organization. And whether it's through the induction process to remind staff coming in that this is how we do things in the performance management system, because this is something that takes place at different points in the year and becomes a great opportunity for another reminder of what the policies are and how everybody needs to adhere to this. I hope you find this helpful. Drop a yes in the comment if you find this interesting or if this is something that you want me to be doing often. So let's continue reading. It then says that there's a question for employers in all industries and not just within television and media. So it applies to everyone. The best way to manage such powerful individuals who seemingly always get their way, as victims and witnesses have described Brand, is to introduce as much objectivity and seniority into investigative processes as possible. And that's why leadership is the solution, even though that can also be the problem. This might include developing policies that might require the hiring of external investigative support in cases of senior managers, or ensuring that the grievance appeals. Similar processes are led by stakeholders from different areas of the business. Now, this is very true and is part of the recommendation of ACAS. However, I have to add that leadership needs to be of a mindset based on principle and not just on the dollar signs, as the people they oversee can become bigger than they themselves. And so, like HR, you need to be principles led and have a strong backbone of integrity. It is not easy and it's not for the faint hearted, that I must say. But do you see the nuance of a situation where everyone else is believed except you? And so this is why it's not just one person making the change. We need a number of people coming together, understanding that this is the culture and the environment that we want to work with, and being able to, advocate for this. Alternatively, the government believes that one way to manage harassment complaints that are silenced or go unnoticed is a ban on non disclosure agreements. These are the NDAs in settlement agreements between affected employees and their employer. Well, this is a debatable point that I think that it needs to be carefully considered or reviewed. But the article continues stating that the widespread use of NDAs to prevent the disclosure of harassment in the workplace particularly came under fire during the hashtag #MeToo movement. Nevertheless, NDAs in settlement agreements are not inherently harmful. Indeed, they can be useful if used in an individual's best interest rather than abused. The key point here in all that has been said is that in the individual's best interest rather than being abused, but that is still a challenge. I think NDAs in itself are tricky, and whenever these things come up, whether it's through a settlement or for whatever, I always try to involve lawyers because this goes a little bit beyond HR, and but they have served their purpose, and I have supported several instances where we ended up with a settlement agreement, and actually sometimes both parties are very much in agreement that that's the best outcome. So it can work, and it can work very well. But I think this is why you need to really carefully consider where it becomes a point of, abuse and silence, or a point by which we just want to resolve things rather than drag things and be a pain for both parties. To the last but one paragraph, it says that additionally, settlement agreements often came at a point when nothing is proven or determined at court. So disclosure could arguably be unjust if it's denied by the alleged perpetrator. That said, the idea is a powerful one because the manner in which such behavior is covered up with a payoff and NDA arguably leads on to an insidious continuation and rise in sexual harassment behavior that becomes nearly impossible to stamp out. Anyway, that's a lot to talk. So I'll summarize by saying that settlement agreements are often made before anything is proven in court. So sharing details might seem unfair if the accused person denies the claims. Still, the concern is that paying someone off and using a non-disclosure agreement can quietly allow sexual harassment to continue. So this is called insidious because the problem grows in a hidden and a harmful way, making it very hard to stop. Do you see that? The article ends stating that dealing with individuals such as Bran is no straightforward task for employers. Employees need to feel confident that any concerns about powerful individuals brought to their employer will be subject to proper processes. Employers should carefully implement detailed policies and procedures and train staff at all levels to ensure expected standards of behavior are understood and adhered to. So, a couple of points. I've shared a lot of things, and if you're still here, that's great. And I've talked about, carefully developing policies, rolling out training and implementation plans. So it's a living document, and letting the leaders advocate this and publicly commit to upholding this no matter the role. Leadership should be led by principles and not just the profit margins. I know it is not easy, but it is very possible if you believe that, because that's the only way that when you're talking about someone bringing in value, it's no longer about, oh, this is how well the person is doing, or this is what the person is doing for the organization. It's also, this is the impact that they're having on the mood, the environment, the culture of the organization. I'll put a checklist in the description box if that's helpful to anyone. So thanks for staying with me to the end. And this Russell Brand case is still unfolding, but the lesson is already clear. When power gets unchecked, becomes unchecked, culture corrodes, and leadership isn't about being liked, it's about being principled. In HR, we're not just bystanders, we're architects of accountability. And it's not just HR, it's actually leadership, HR, anybody who is into people management needs to really think about the actions and the choices that they make, and what is the motive and the desired outcome from whatever actions that they choose, because it's not always about the outcome that is profit based or being liked, but it can also be about the outcome that is more principled led and has longer term benefits for the organization as a whole. Now, drop your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever worked somewhere where someone was untouchable? What's your HR wisdom? And don't forget to subscribe. Until next time, keep making progress with care.